This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
enough. You can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for. Okay, in this video, I wanted to do some sort of chat around bits and pieces of gear that I wouldn't buy again. And this will be for a mix of reasons. It's not because I didn't necessarily like some of this gear. It's just I'm not sure whether I would do it again. And so that's kind of what we get into. There's going to be a bit of playing here with this guitar, which is a parts caster that John Martin, the tech who lives just down the road, has helped me put together. He's done quite a lot of the important work, like making the nut, making the scratch plate, drilling the holes for the neck, did the installation of the tuners, like all of the important bits, but string retainer. All I did really was selected the parts, asked Montys to send me a set of these retro wine pickups, which are amazing. I need to do a video on them, but these are my favourite sounding humbuckers ever. And I finished this body, which is a ash body with a semi-hollow bit and Gecko grain filler and then some white nitro. But anyway, just a really nice guitar. And then the Nacho, which, will it feature in this video? Maybe the Nacho will fit here. Still does look incredible, doesn't it? Oh, if you do ever want to check out some of my full transcriptions of solos that I play, there's I think about 12 or 13 of them up now on Patreon, so you could join for the £5 a month tier and get access to them all if you wanted to, and backing track, a full transcription PDF, and Guitar Pro that goes up there. So first of all, a guitar which I don't think I would buy again, and it's taught me some sort of cautionary stuff more than anything else. So this is a pretty much, it's got some original elements of it, the Tokai Goldstar from the 80s. And what is wrong with it? Well, actually kind of nothing, but it did take John Martin quite a lot of work to get it there. So this guitar had been re-fretted, and the fret job that had been done on it was pretty ropey, and I'd be cautious of buying sort of an 80s Tokai without getting your hands on it first to really see what's going on. Also, this has been changed, and this pickup here is definitely not original, and so, you know, there's a question mark in my head about, you know, whether this is a great guitar or not. The tuners are still original, and that's the one thing that I think would definitely need replacing. Other than that, it's in pretty okay condition, but I think I overpaid for it because, you know, this seems to be the thing, that there's some guitars that you see on Reverb and someone's sort of put them up there and they'll put it up at a price without like an offer, just hoping that someone will take a punt on it. I wouldn't do that again without getting the guitar into my hands. It's kind of my thought, because, you know, if you buy something like this and it's already sort of priced over £600 or something like that, what seems like you might be getting a bit of a bargain might have some sort of nasty surprises that you'll need someone to fix. And of course, buying a guitar like this used, you got sort of a little bit less leeway for getting your money back versus buying a new guitar. Anyway, so that's one sort of cautionary thing. Can't think of too many guitars that I feel this about, but there is definitely a PRS DGT that I bought from Dave up the road, and I think it was about £2,500 that I paid for that guitar, and I never really got on with it at all. Never played it much. It just was not a guitar that I liked. Now, weirdly enough, when the PRS DGT SE came along, I way preferred that guitar, but that's a guitar that I don't think I'd ever buy it again. It did look really cool, had some really distinct features. It was a Wood Library guitar, but to me, that guitar, I just never really got on with it. Didn't end up playing it. It sat in the cupboard for a long time, and then I, just sold it because it was like, this is not really doing it for me. At the same time, he had a Silver Sky, which it was in the Dodge and Blue, and I think probably I've been better off paying that. I guess he would have wanted a similar sort of amount of money for that, but anyway, Silver Sky, not the DGT, that's the way I should have gone. The other week, I met David Beebe and Tom Quayle earlier in the year, and I walked past the shop and I saw this, the Dumbloid Twin. Now, I've done a video on this. I do think it does things a little bit closer to the sort of Dumble clones that I played, which do not have a particularly liquid feel, I have to say. Like, it's somewhere between what you think of as that Dumble sound and fuzz, and it kind of is a little bit not super easy to play. I wouldn't buy this pedal again. If any of you out there are looking to buy one of these, then do feel free to get in touch, but it's not my favourite thing in the world. It does do a thing. I imagine maybe it works slightly better at volume, but to me, I feel like it's a little bit of a thing which is maybe overpriced for what you get. Speaking of, there's a couple of pedals that I've owned in the past that I've sold since, and I did really like them, but looking at what the prices that people are asking for them now, I just don't think I'd ever consider paying that much money for a pedal again. One of them is the Vemuram TSV800 or 808, whatever it is. Like, Vemuram made this collaboration with Ibanez, and it's a Tube Screamer / Jan Ray. It's now fetching, or people are asking prices of around 2,000. Certainly, I've seen lots of them sell for around about 1,000. To me, it's a great sounding pedal, but you can get those sounds with something like a normal Jan Ray, which is conservatively priced relative to that, or a Timmy, or a clone of those sorts of pedals. I just think, you don't need to to grab one of those pedals. If you bought one at launch that was like £400, which seemed expensive at the time, it seems to me like it might be worth hanging on to, because the prices on those seems to still be kind of skyrocketing. The Ibanez TS10, now I bought a couple of these when they were about £150, £160. One of them Jake still has, my buddy. The other I had, but I sold it because it definitely had a really cool sound. What I ended up keeping, because my buddy Johan Lauer over in France, he found these, the Metal Screamer. Now they're roughly quite similar to the TS10. I think there's a small difference in like bass response. This is the Metal Screamer, which also they have kind of gone up in price as well, but it's like the same enclosure. It's not green. It doesn't attract quite as much as hype as the TS10, but at the end of the day, a tube screamer is a tube screamer mostly, and these are not necessarily the most reliable pedals in general. So to put loads of money into like a pedal like this, which might have a dodgy switch, not a great idea. Speaking of, I bought this Ibanez SD9 because this is, again, like a vintage pedal that is relatively affordable versus some other vintage pedals, but this has a switching issue, and so my buddy Tony up the road did try to fix it. Didn't have much luck with it. It seems to be something which is weather dependent or heat dependent, so if you heat it up it will work a bit better, but in any case I've ended up with a slightly overpriced lime green lump. Another pedal, or maybe it's just pedals in general, this is a Boss SD1 80s, and it sounds like an SD1, and my buddy David Beebe was over in Seattle with Tom Quayle, and Tom was buying an SD1 or something like that, and I just demoed like a £40 SD1 or whatever I paid for it, and for whatever reason I said, yeah, just grab that, because there was a vintage one in the shop that he was at, and to be honest, like, it stays on the shelf. An SD1 is an SD1. I think to some extent, I don't think it's necessary to get caught up in the hype, like, you know, just get an SD1 for 40 quid off eBay, don't buy a vintage one, is what I've kind of decided would have been a better bet. Stepping away from pedals for a sec, I've got a Steinberg UR RT4 over there, which I bought at the time because it has these Neve transformers on it, which I don't know whether they do much at all. It's got Neve in the name, so they sold it for a little bit more. But since I've learned that essentially it's quite a noisy interface, which is not ideal when using Helix native or plugins and that sort of thing, where to keep things consistent, I tend to turn the input down to like off, which as you then bring up you know, volumes and compressor and stuff like that, if it's an interface with a particularly noisy converter, all that sort of stuff, then it's just not really ideal. So I think I'd have just, at this point, if I was buying again, I'd go for something like straightforward, like a Focusrite Scarlett or something like that, just because it's known. I think the latency is probably about similar to that, and the conversions are slightly less noisy. I think that's what I'd be doing. In terms of amps, what I've got here, a deluxe reverb. I bought this 1965 Pro Reverb off of my buddy Jake. At the time, I can't remember what it was he needed money for, something. But this has 2 EV speakers in it, and it's had the transformers changed, the output transformers. To be honest with you, it doesn't leave the house much. When it has done, it's a great time, but it's a heavy beast. It needs a voltage step up transformer to get it working as well. And honestly, I don't get a ton of use out of it. I think, looking back, would I buy that again? Quite possibly not. It's just one of those things where, in general, I think a vintage amp, you need to have someone nearby who is going to be able to sort these things out for you and look after them, because a Fender amp in general can be fairly noisy. Certainly a Fender amp from the 60s with a spring reverb in there is very, well, in my experience here, likely to be quite noisy and need a fair amount of maintenance. I don't think I'd do it again. This intro I was using, I think I've had a couple of these over the years. First one that I traded with Jake, he wanted a Strymon Iridium, and I had a Van Weelden Royal Overdrive on eBay, and he was like, do you want to trade that? It's probably the best trade I ever made. It's probably the worst that Jake ever made, but that was how we met in general. The prices on these are now a little bit silly. Now, I do think this is probably my favourite overdrive pedal, and it is very, very, very amp-like, particularly live. It's a beautiful kind of squishy thing. I do love it, but it's quite a heavy thing and quite difficult to power, or it would have been, you know, back when I first got one, but these days I guess it's a little bit easier because a lot of power supplies will do 9 volt, 12 volts or 18 volts, so you can do that 650, 450 or 300. I don't think I'd buy one again. Equally, would I sell this one? No, because when I do plug it in, anytime I do, it's just a fantastic experience. Now, I've not spoken about exactly what I traded this guitar for, so we'll keep this quiet between me and you. I got sent a couple of Gretsch guitars, which for whatever reason just didn't suit me at all, and I traded it into Project Music towards this Fender Custom Shop. It's a cool telly, but did I really need another telly? The answer is probably no. So I think this one will be on the chopping block at some point. Yeah, and would I ever buy a Gretsch guitar? I think the answer for me is no. I've just kind of found that guitars with a big speed just do not really sit well with me at all. Now, I'm prepared for that to be challenged, but in general, a big speed to me just seems like a little bit of a risk. Now, talking of risks and would I do it again? Now, the Natro project in general, I do think had some benefit to me, in terms of like it enabled me to sell, or encouraged me to sell, some pieces of gear that were in the house that otherwise I probably wouldn't have sold. But would I buy a guitar with a pronounced V-neck again? I think the answer is going to be no. And I guess I was quite like rash to buy this, because you don't see them in the UK very often, and you still don't, to be fair. Like, I've not seen one for sale in the UK since this one, which I bought from Coda. I think the price was okay relative to what they're charging for them at the moment. But yeah, it's one of those things where I played it an awful lot for a while, and then found, like, I think my left hand did not really agree with the V-neck, the V profile, which is an important lesson to learn, I guess. If you're going to play a guitar for hours, then make sure that it's a neck profile that's not going to give you particular issues. There are real reasons to think that a V profile might not suit you, particularly if you're used to having your thumb somewhere around here. If you're a thumb over player, it might suit you really well, but you've got a smaller sort of area to put your thumb. So it's a lesson learned for me. I think it's a beautiful guitar and a beautiful lesson, and it did enable me to sell a bunch of gear which more than paid for the Nacho. But as I say, that was an experiment. At this point, I don't know, what would I do? I would maybe be less inclined to buy a guitar at this kind of money without playing it first. That is an insane thing to do, isn't it, really? But, you know, gas is real. and when you're thinking, right, I've sold all these guitars, I've got this money that's ready to spend on something, and suddenly there's one available in Coda Music, and I wouldn't have to pay like a massive import charge and anything, you know, I was very quick to say, look, I need to try that. And I'm kind of glad I did, but at the same time, would I do it again, or would I recommend anyone else do the same? Not really. It would be silly, wouldn't it? And that's, I think, it's a relatively short-ish list, and there's no real like disasters here particularly, right? The DGT one did feel like a disaster because I had it for sale for quite a long time, and I would say what I've also kind of learned over the last couple of months really is that, well, I wouldn't mess around with certain types of pickups anymore, because I know, having played some guitars now that have the pickups that I like in them, that I don't think I'd experiment too much with other pickups. So these are Montys retro wines in here, which to me are just fantastic sounding. And then in the Ibanez Roadstar, I put in some Montys pre-65 pickups, and again, these to me are like my favorite Strat pickups now, like maybe even better than a lot of Dirty Blondes. The only other guitar that I've had these in was the yellow K-line, which Charlie Allen has at the moment. Just fantastic sounding pickups, and it kind of solves that issue, like I wouldn't have to go out there and sort of experiment with other pickups, and it's a good lesson for me, like to limit that idea about how much stuff you might want to try potentially. Anyway, so let me know your thoughts in the comments about pieces of gear that you've bought that you wouldn't buy again, and equally, like if there's things that you're so happy that you took a risk on, you know, leave some comments in that field. There might be some modelers that you guys have tried that you wouldn't bother with. I think for me, the Nano Cortex has been interesting to talk about, but I bought 2 of them because they did a firmware update. Would I buy one again? To be honest, I think it's kind of run its course for me. I understand what the Nano Cortex does, and I understand some of the limitations. It's a cool unit, but capture alone is not really something that I'm that interested in. So yeah, that's that video. Catch you in another video soon.